All right, we haven't started the meeting, right?
Processing that information.
Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we have Wednesday's pet? All right. First item up, Ms. Stenick has come back to present Wednesday's pet.
This is Chaos. Chaos is 3 to 4 months old. He's over at our local, what is it, 211? Animal
211
Control.
One Rock Highway.
211 One Rod Highway. He will be up for adoption on Saturday, and he is pretty well behaved and likes to kiss a lot. So if you're interested in a lab mix who's about 3 to 4 months old and looking for a new home, come by on Saturday.
All right, has every pet that's been on here actually been taken?
Every one but one.
All but one. We have a very old
Highly
Cocker
successful,
spaniel
yep.
who's not. So he's still looking for a home for somebody who just wants a nice, quiet dog who will sleep.
Okay, that's an amazing track record. Thank you. All right, next up on the agenda, to consider and act upon the minutes of regular meeting November 16th, 2011. Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second? Thank you. Any discussion or any changes? You okay with it?
Yes.
I'm okay with it. Any comments from the public on the minutes? Thank you. Back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstention.
Next up, can I have a motion to accept the refunds as submitted by the tax collector?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Yes.
All right. And then for information only, next item, we've had a number of resignations. Some of these are due to people getting elected to other boards. Some of these are due to, actually, most of them are due to that, some for personal reasons on the side. But from the top, Flood and Erosion Control Board, Dave DeCilio has resigned. Land Acquisition Commission, Philip Dwyer has resigned. Parking Authority, Robert Comers has resigned. Solid Waste and Recycling Commission, Mark Patton has resigned. Town Facilities Commission, William Sapone has resigned. And Town Treasurer, Cheryl Shaughnessy has resigned. Next up, the Town Clerk has submitted for reappointment of sub-registrars the following names: Barbara Dugallo, Samuel Green, Kevin Lesko, Frank Polk, Richard Miller, Pamela Shaughnessy Banks. With permission of the board, is it okay to include these together, and may I have a motion to accept the town clerk's recommendation?
I move to accept the recommendation together.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a question, being new, you'll probably have more than a few of these from me. Exactly what, I don't know if you can answer this, or I don't see the town clerk here, but the duties are simply to record the deaths through the registrar's office, I would assume.
That's my understanding, looking at the number of funeral directors included on the list. Mr. Walsh, would you have any follow-up
I
to
believe
that?
that's the exact reason.
Since you are now the senior member of this board.
That's scary.
Assuming that the role is to record the deaths. With the deaths for funeral homes, and that's the duty of the sub-registrar. Just asking for clarification of the role.
Well, it's probably to get the names to the town clerk to have them removed from the voter registration list, I would expect.
And just procedurally, I know we moved to make a motion to hear them all together, but we also have to make a motion to approve, which I make.
Okay, second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Any discussion from the public? All right, back to the board. Ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next up, we're starting to do some appointments. Kind of work through. We've got a few pages of backup here. All right, next up are two first selectman appointments. One, a reappointment to the Parking Authority, Joanne Sheehan. And her resume is in the packet if you're interested. And actually, just to be clear, there'll be another Joanne Sheehan, who is also an RN, under discussion later in the meeting. These are two different people. And then second, on the Employee Retirement Board, Robert Malarkey. Bob has been serving as chair of that board and the Joint Retirement Board. The second item B here, Mr. Malarkey will actually go to the RTM for approval after. That's that item. Okay, next up is item 8, to hear, consider, and act upon the following reappointments.
Can I just ask you a question? This Joanne Sheehan under the Parking Authority, I
Yes.
didn't see her resume. Is she a
It's right here.
commuter?
I'm sorry. I don't know for sure. I believe she works down in Stamford. So if she does, it's only a partial commute.
Her resume says that she is a associate at the law firm of Friedman, Newman, Levy, and Sheehan. I thought that firm was in Fairfield. Maybe I'm wrong.
That's not an updated resume.
Oh, it says to present. Okay, it says 1987 to present.
It does on the type. It was handed to us a while back.
Okay. Because
Joanne Sheehan, somebody I know personally.
Okay.
From that
Now, the only reason I'm asking is because we had talked, and we've had this issue come up with the Parking Authority where we were putting a lot of non-commuters on. And we had made commitments to not only the Parking Authority, but some of the commuters that we were going to put a commuter on, the Parking Authority. And I just want to confirm that she is a commuter.
Yeah, this is a reappointment
Sure.
in that regard, so
Yeah, it's a little bit different, sure.
all right, we still have the opening for
Yeah,
Mr.
the other-
Comers.
Yeah, okay.
And to that, just to be clear, we've had an ongoing discussion, and it has been requested by Mary Kay Frost, Chairman of the Parking Authority, that we in fact look to get more commuters onto the Parking Authority. So that has been one of our guidelines, so that's a discussion that both Mr. Walsh and Ms. McCarthy-Vahey and I've had about what our guidelines should be and what we're looking for there. But in the case of the reappointment, it seemed that somebody had been serving and on that deserved a chance to continue at this point. So, moving on to reappointments, to hear and consider and act upon the following reappointments. And actually, I'm going to turn to you, Mr. Walsh. This is a huge number. Do you, in your experience on this board, do we go through is it better to go through these one at a time or look at them as a group?
I think in the past, we've kind of quickly gone through them, just in case those people are here to acknowledge them.
Okay.
If
And vote
they-
them at the
if they
end,
Come
or
down through
voted-
come down here through the end. I think we've normally voted on them each section, but if there's more than one person in a section, we'll put both names up, or if there's more than one.
Okay, in this case, we've got A through K.
A through K, but in some of them we have whatever. I understand what you're saying about taking time, but,
We'll take them one at a time, unless there's
I
a
agree.
recommendation to do it some other way.
okay.
All right. First up is Board of Health is Carolyn Shea. And I believe you've got a resume in your packet. Is Ms. Shea here? All right, it's not unusual for reappointments not to be here since they were here the first time when they got appointed. And we generally make that very optional for them and don't necessarily encourage those to attend. So I don't want anybody to read into any of that. Any questions by the board?
No. Okay.
quick question. I see that Sands Cleary is here, and just wondering if he has had a conversation with her, and I believe that they have through the office, that you're comfortable with the reappointment.
Mr. Cleary?
Discussed it with her and with the chairman, and both are in favor, and she's willing to serve again. She'd been finishing out the last few months of the term of someone who had to step down because they moved out of town.
Great.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
No.
Any comments from the public? Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. One down. Flood and Erosion Control Board, Albert Grauer of 268 Welland Road. Is Mr. Grauer here? All right. Any questions or discussion from the board?
Move to accept.
All right.
Second.
Second, all right. Any comments from the public? All right, back to the board. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next up, Harbor Commission, Mr. Hugh Smith and Ms. Sandy Mann. Is Mr. Smith or Ms. Mann here? Ms. Mann? Okay. Welcome, and I think you've got background on both in your packet. Because these are reappointments, as I'm looking at these, it's easy to see that some of these were submitted a couple years back when they were probably first appointed to the board. Any discussion?
Just would note, having served on the RTM and knowing what their process is, it might be helpful to get updated information for them for the RTM, as that's often been a request of theirs, even
Okay.
for a reappointment.
Very good. Charlotte, would you be good enough to make a note of that in the minutes and make sure Jen sees that? All right, any other discussion?
No, I'd just like to thank Ms. Mann for her service. She's been before us a number of times and during budget times, and I really appreciate your service, and thanks for agreeing to serve again.
Now should we vote to see if she gets to
Sure.
do that?
Yeah.
All right, All
I
in-
move it. I guess
You
we
move-
moved it.
second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Congratulations, Ms. Mann. Historic District Commission. Next, we have Ellen Gould and Adam Cliver. Is Ms. Gould or Mr. Cliver here? All right. Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion?
If I may.
Mhm.
I would just say also thank you, though they're not here. This is great that they're coming back, because I know we've had some issues with keeping people on this commission, so I'm glad to see that they're willing to return, both Ellen and Adam.
All right. Any comments from the public? Is the board ready to vote?
Sure.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Historic District, Parks and Rec. One adjustment here. Mr. Plotkin called me to let me know that Robert McMaster is reconsidering whether he wants to continue on or not on that board. So I would suggest that we postpone that till the next meeting so I can confirm that. And so I move to postpone Mr. McMaster's consideration till next meeting. All
Second.
right, thank you. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Charlotte, again, please make a note of that so that Jen gets to see that. All right, that leaves Mr. Brian Nareau of 105 Mountain Laurel Road. Can I have a motion to accept his nomination or reappointment?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any comment from the public? All right, back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Yes. Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that makes that quick. Thank you.
Isn't that the first and second on that one?
I'm going
It
to, I
was
thought Ms.
myself
McCarthy
and
Behe.
then
Did, and I
Mr.
seconded.
Walsh seconded.
Next up, Police and Fire Retirement Board. Frederick Schaefer of 137 Woodhouse Road. His resume is in your packet. Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved. So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kristen. Any discussion?
No.
All right. Any public comment? All right, back to the board. Ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
This is on Mr. Schaefer.
Yep.
Yes.
Abstaining.
201. Police Commission is up next, Mr. Sam Lassinger. Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right. Mr. Lassinger's not in the room, is he? Okay. Any comment?
I believe that this is his third, will be his third term, if I'm not mistaken. Just noting that for the conversation as I believe he's served with distinction and has been a faithful member of that board, that commission, I should say. But just wanting to clarify if I'm correct in my understanding from the documentation that we had.
I'm not sure. Where did you see that?
It was in the packet that we're in right now. Here we go.
I know in some boards and commissions, there's a max of 2 terms. Do we know if that holds for this board either?
Off the top of my head, I don't. I know that there are certain limitations.
Yeah, I was gonna look it up on.
What was the question?
Can somebody serve for more than 2 terms on the police commission?
If their initial term was a partial term, they can.
They can, yes.
This appears 11-1 to 11-6 as appears to be 5 years, and 11-6 to 11-11 appears to be 5 years.
Okay, that would seem to be 2 full terms then. But I think you need to check with the town clerk and make sure that first term was a full
Good.
term.
Yes.
Under that circumstances, I move to postpone consideration of Mr. Lassinger until we can confirm that.
I second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. And again, Charlotte, if you can make a note on the minutes to make sure we take that action. Next up, Shellfish Commission, Mr. Sanford Wakeman, 364 Wakeman Road. Don't think I have a background sheet on Mr. Wakeman. Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any
I want
discussion?
to just like discuss it, because on his, if you look at his page on the Shellfish Commission, he next to his name where it says,
Is that the last page?
it's right after the Police Commission one, so here's,
There we go.
to the right, it says, his first term is kind of similar as the last one, but it says, I think it says replace in parentheses, so he probably replaced somebody, and that's why the next section says it was his first term. And if you go back to the last one, I guess the clarification is on the Police Commission, on Mr. Lassinger, they do have the first and second. For some reason, next to his name, it doesn't have first or second or replacement, so there's some confusion. I guess we got to do some research on.
That's what the clarification is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think it is, so I think Mr. Wakeman has no problem in this one, and we can move forward.
All right, and we'll take a look at getting that perhaps a little clearer on these records so it's
Updated,
easier
yeah.
going forward. All right, any comments from the public? All right, is Mr. Wakeman here? Okay. Ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, done. All right, next up, Solid Waste and Recycling Commission. Mr. William Schoaf, the resume is in your packet. Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Another comment, just again, the RTM, just to note for that one as well, just a little bit more information. I don't know, this doesn't have a date on it, and this is just a general comment that I will probably repeat at this table many times, is that I'd love to make sure we have dates on all the documents that we get, as well as attributions, but I'll get to that one later. But for this, just, it's not clear when this came in.
Okay, points well taken. Charlotte, again, for the minutes, could you make sure we have an action item that says, get an updated resume on Mr. Schoaf? Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? Is Mr. Schoaf here? Back to the board. Ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, next up, tree warden, Mr. Kenneth Placco. This is something we have to do on a regular basis to reappoint our tree warden. I see Mr. Placco is here, in case we have any questions. Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
No, I'd just like to thank him for his service, and I know this year's been a little busier than most with those storms.
I found some time to come to.
But we look forward to the next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Same, I would reiterate those same comments. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, I'll make that a third, and I also know that with all that has happened from the storm, there will be ongoing conversations, so I imagine we'll be talking
Well,
to
sure we
you.
will.
So thank you.
Any comment from the public? Back to the board, are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in
Yes.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Ken.
As it can.
Yes.
Welcome back aboard. All right. Next up, Water Pollution Control Authority. Ronald Drew, 187 Orchard Hill Lane. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Same issue with the date. Assume it's, well, I don't know that this is current, I doubt it that it is, but
Charlotte, again, would you make a note in the minutes for that? Any other discussion? Any comments from the public? All those, back to the board, ready to vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Next up, two appointments. These are first selectman appointments. You have background sheets in your packet. We appointed Catherine O'Donnell to the Conservation Commission, and we have a new town treasurer, Helen Devanza. I know Helen's here. Please stand up. Helen, thank you for taking on the task of being our new town treasurer. Helen has served on the RTM and on the Finance Committee of the RTM, and she chaired that. She's also served on the Board of Finance. She also helps out with tax preparation at the Senior Center. Currently serves on the Board of Operation Hope. Has been very active in the town, and I think is a great addition to our town as the new town treasurer. Is Ms. O'Donnell here? All right, we'll move on from there.
I'd also like to second your comments. I've had the honor and pleasure to work with Helen on the RTM and a number of other committees, and recently saw some of her work at Operation Hope, and don't think it could be in better hands. We'll miss Ms. Shaughnessy, certainly, but I think it's a great addition. Thanks for agreeing to serve.
And I'm going to second those remarks.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right, now on to item 10. Here, consider and act upon the following appointments. The first one is Denise Walsh. Ms. Walsh couldn't make it today. She asked that we postpone this to the 21st, so she could be here in attendance, if that's okay with the board. I'll move to postpone to a date certain our next meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Harbor Commission. Next up, we have 4 recommendations for appointments. Benjamin Baker, James Harmon, Norman Marsilius, and Nelson North. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Is Mr. Baker here? All right. I guess we should take these one at a time. Do we have any questions for Mr. Baker? All right. Thank you. Is Mr. Harmon here? Any? Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Harmon? All right, thank you. Marsilius, is Mr. Marsilius here? Do we have any questions for Mr. Marsilius?
No.
And thank you. And is Mr. North here?
Sir.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. North?
No.
All right, thank you. Any comments from the public? May I have a motion to accept? I know we had a motion to accept this. Did that cover all 4 recommendations? And are you comfortable with just making all 4 at once?
I'm comfortable. I mean, we have perfect attendance by everybody.
Okay.
So
just-
And they've been
we got some
recommended by-
eager gentlemen willing to take it on, so.
So we have a motion to accept all 4 as recommended. Let's just make a second on that, just to be
Second.
confirmed. Thank you. Ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thanks.
Please protect our harbor. It is in your hands. All right, next up, Human Services Commission. We have appointments of Mark Andre and Kevin Lennon. Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right. Is Mr. Andre here? All right. Do we have any questions for Mr. Andre?
Do. I know with the last set of appointments, I didn't ask because I know that they had been recommended by the chair, just wondering, and this is from RTM experience, just wonder if you've had a chance to talk to anyone on the commission and have an understanding of the commission and its work and when they meet and all that good stuff.
Not yet, but I did talk to David Beck, and I have a sense what they probably be looking for me, and I'm looking forward to helping as much as I can.
All right, I had a chance to talk with Mr. Andre, too, and forwarded him the charge of the committee, or the commission, as it is in the charter.
I have to say that I did, before I forwarded my resume to your office, I did had a phone call from Claire, and I think she's the director there, so I talked to
Yes.
her. That was
Wonderful.
after our conversation, then I decided to put my hat.
Great.
So.
And
Thank you.
Claire was totally supportive of Mr. Andre's appointment to the board.
Can I just ask a question? I mean, I'm looking under the Human Services Commission. There's not really a question for you, but are there currently only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members?
If that's what's there, that would be my understanding.
The ex officio members, I presume, don't count.
Correct.
Okay, so that's why we're adding 2, because there's room to add, correct? Because no one's resigned.
No, 2 terms finished up, so
Okay.
they didn't resign.
So that's why they're
Terms
not
came to
on
an
here?
end. Yes, that would be my understanding.
Okay, I just wanted to. Because the remaining terms seem to go to 13,
This is-
13,
yep.
12.
This
So
is-
so someone updated this, and the
Correct.
people that's terms expired, they...
Are not on that list.
Okay, great.
And it looks, according to your comments, we still have 1 vacancy on
Yes.
there.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Andre.
Thank you.
Is Mr. Lennon here?
I am.
Any questions for Mr. Lennon?
Same line of questioning. Essentially, were you able to have any conversations with folks similar to Mr. Andre that help you get a sense of the commission and the work that they do.
I was, because I spoke with Dave Beck initially about the opening on the commission, and then I did speak with Claire. We had a nice conversation. I've also spoke with Jen Hochberg, who previously served in the commission's secretary for her elevation up to the RTM and her election just this past November. I've done a fair bit of research, and I'm familiar with the senior center as well. My mother used to go there prior to her demise, and my kids went to Child's Garden, so I had some interaction next door over the years.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? All right, any public comment? Are we ready to vote?
May I make a comment?
Sure.
I want to thank both Mr. Andre and Mr. Lennon for getting involved in this, and I think, our seniors and all those who are in need active participants, and I know that you both will be, and I'm grateful that you're willing to serve.
Along those lines, I also think it's important that when we talk about being one community, it's great that we have some non-seniors that are interested in being on the Human Services Commission and helping with some of the senior services and such in town here. So I thank both of you gentlemen for that.
I second both those comments. Thank you.
Are we ready to vote now?
Yes.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service to the town. Next up, to hear, consider, and act upon the following recommendation from the Penfield Reef Lighthouse Commission, or Fairfield Reef Lighthouse Preservation Committee. Resolved that the town proceed to obtain a lease on the bottomlands from the state of Connecticut in lieu of obtaining a quitclaim deed, and to pursue the possibility of obtaining a quitclaim deed to secure the bottomlands in perpetuity. And further resolved that the town bid on the Penfield Reef Lighthouse if other bidders withdraw, and if the committee has raised sufficient funds from the town to make such a bid. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, thank you. Ms. Mann, do you have any presentation for us or any
I
comments?
have some comments. if
Okay.
that's all right. I believe in the Selectmen's package that some information was provided to you.
Excuse me, Ms. Mann, could you identify yourself for the minute?
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry. Sandy Mann, Reef Road, Fairfield. I'm the chairman of the Penfield Reef Lighthouse Preservation Committee. I'm here today actually to give you a bit of an update from the report that I gave at the November 16th Selectmen meeting. There were some specific requests that you asked me for information on that I'd like to refer to. At the last meeting, you made specific requests for the following. You requested a review of the purchase contract by Eileen Kennelly outlining the requirements for the purchase. You requested that we acquire the bottomlands under the lighthouse. You specifically stated that you would prefer that the town own the bottomlands rather than lease them. You also requested information on the maintenance costs for the lighthouse on an annual basis. You also requested a 5-year plan showing funding for repairs needed on the structure. And you requested that I explore a partnership with Mr. Michael Hennenberry, with Eileen Kennelly participating in the conversation. In the packet of materials that you received prior to today's meeting, there was a document in which Ms. Kennelly has reviewed the contract that the GSA would use, which is a quitclaim deed. That should be in the packet that I have. It is referred to as lighthouse acquisition, and it goes on to explain the quitclaim deed that would be used by the General Service Administration in the acquisition of the lighthouse by the purchaser. The second item was an item on the bottomlands under the lighthouse. I know that Ms. Kennelly wrote an email to David Blatt, who's the gentleman on the DEEP with whom we have been in touch. He also was at the site inspection that was held back in November. And I had the occasion to speak with him on something else following Miss Kennelly's letter. I asked Ms. Carpenter to include in your package of materials an update, but I am not certain that it is here. There was a letter, a brief letter that I received from Mr. Black stating that he felt that Ms. Kennelly's inquiry was a preliminary. He did say that they had met briefly in the DEEP and held a meeting on our inquiry. If we wish to pursue this, he felt that there had to be a letter that came from the selectmen requesting that the town be allowed to lease the bottom lands and the substantive reasons for requesting the lease of those lands. So that if they were to act on this, that would be something that we would need to provide them with. This is something that I was just notified about yesterday. I did forward that information to Jennifer for your review today. I see that it did not make it into the package. However, should we wish to go in that route, that is what we would need to do. The next portion of this was a request for a review of the maintenance costs on the lighthouse on an annual basis. When the committee sat down, we tried to look at this from an annualized basis. And what we did was to ask Mr. Ed McCourt, who's the manager of the Fairfield buildings, and Mr. Jim Girardi, who's in the engineering department and is an architect, to accompany us when we went on the site inspection. I'd like to refer you to a 2-page document that was in your package that is entitled Penfield Lighthouse 5-Year Plan, January 1st, 2012 to December 31st, 2016. What we tried to do is to take a plan for the renovations that needed to be done and try to work out what would be involved on an annualized basis in terms of activities needed for the potential renovation, as well as any restorations, as well as any annualized costs that would occur as a part of that process. It was not until today, in fact, that I had some figures that came in on insurance, which is a component of the annualized cost. I was in touch with a gentleman who serves as the insurance agent for the Sheffield Reef Light, which is down in Norwalk. The folks down there have dealt with a gentleman named Dan O'Connor for a number of years, and they have considered him somewhat of an expert at rating lighthouses and providing insurance, although he says that he isn't. However, I did discover that he is in touch with the right people to give him good information. In today, I'm not sure that this has been added, but there should be a quote and a letter from him for you that has an email from Daniel O'Connor, who is rated as a CPCU in the insurance industry. I have a quote from Middlesex Mutual Assurance Company, and it turns out that our lighthouse is eligible for FEMA flood insurance. However, it turns out that the area around Penfield Reef Lighthouse has never actually been rated by FEMA. And when FEMA presents a flood plan for a community, it's based on wave velocity that is calculated from the shore inland. And that is how they decide on the zones that are covered by FEMA insurance. In this case, no one inquired about Penfield Reef Lighthouse. And as a result, surprising to me, they had never rated it. which means that it fits in under what's called a D code, which means that there is no rating on it. However, with the parameters on the lighthouse, and with the possibility of this being tied in with the town, they did quote a premium for potential flood damage of $1,328, which I might point out was much lower than the figure that we had estimated when we put the figures together that are on our 5-year plan. In addition, I also received, as of this afternoon, a liability insurance plan, also from Darby, Sharp Darby, excuse me. I get their name mixed backwards all the time. And that coverage was put together with $100,000 of insurance based on perhaps the building cost of potentially $90,000 at auction as a maximum. And that policy quote for liability insurance, it's here on one of these pages, I apologize to you, came in at $3,426. Now, I'm mentioning these figures to you to point out that the estimate that we used in our 5-year plan was double the amount that the insurance would actually cost. Unfortunately, it took a while to get a rating on all of this and to have this information come in. I'm wondering if I can call on Mr. McCourt and Mr. Girardi in case you have any questions on this 5-year report. Were there any questions about the numbers that are here?
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, Kristen.
So essentially, and this goes back to my earlier comments, having, and I'm not meaning to single you out, I'm going to.
Oh, I understand. Not to worry.
And who created this. So essentially, this document was created by the committee, and the numbers that were used were estimates from Mr. McCourt and Mr. Girardi.
I would like to correct that information.
Okay.
Actually, under Rich White's auspices, Mr. McCourt and Mr. Girardi were asked to put this plan together based upon their personal site inspections. They reviewed the prior numbers that we had when we did a site inspection a number of years ago, when the National Park Service was originally involved with all of this. And we went back out there, and they both were with us for that entire inspection. And these numbers emerged from that inspection and all of the areas that need attention. If you recall, when I met with you before and reported to you the last time, not a lot has changed out there. So that the original numbers were quite valid even at this point. There are some differences in them because there's a time period that's been involved. And there's more cleanup that needs to be done. But they have written in the cost for hygienists, which we feel is very important because before anything can be done, we would need to take a look at an abatement program with the hygienist. So we have budgeted that in. We've tried to be very thorough in all of this. When you try to look at maintenance on a building that needs to undergo renovation and change, maintenance typically would get done as a part of any change program. So it's hard for us to single out, a separate maintenance budget in any way.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh, any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I do. In regards to the estimates, year in and year out, year one, I see that you're going to remove the lead paint and plaster from the interior walls and remove the lead paint from the exterior shingles.
Mhm.
I don't see anything within year one where you're going to either replace the plaster or paint from either the interior walls or the paint from the exterior shingles. So are you imagining that after the lead paint is removed, those shingles are going to stay bare and the walls are not going to be up?
May I ask you, Mr. McCord?
Mr. McCourt, if you could come up to the podium, please.
Thank you.
My name is Ed McCord. I work for the DPW, Building Department. Our plan was to remove the plaster and the lathing from the structure. Not replace it, but to review the damage that could be done to the structure, which we don't know. You know, you can't see anything at this point. And if you look at year 2, that is actually when we'll do an engineering report of the structure, finding out exactly what damage was done in there. It's going to take time. Now, the exterior of the building, the shingles are asbestos. They'll take no damage at all by just removing the lead paint. So,
The shingles are asbestos, so does that mean that the shingles all have to be removed and
no,
replaced
they
with new
don't.
shingles?
No, they
Okay.
don't. They're in good shape, and they can stay as they are.
The asbestos shingles can stay up?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I have the...
Yeah, there's
Mr.
no
Girardi-
abatement needed to take them off at this time. I mean,
Right, no.
they're in good shape.
And the historical requirements, actually.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Girardi went through these. The historical requirements do not dictate the removal of something. It is only if something needs repair that it gets changed.
So the exterior paint that's on these asbestos shingles
Mhm.
will be taken off?
There's very little on it at this time. There's very, very little. Yeah, so there'd be really, actually, the exterior of the building's in better shape. That's why we're concentrating on the inside, to make sure that the structure's sound. So that's our first game plan, is to go in there and really get rid of the plaster, which is falling, it's falling into the building, and it's got to come out.
When you take the remaining exterior paint off the shingles, is that a white paint color? The color's
The
white?
color is actually gray. The asbestos shingles are like an older transite gray. So it's a gray.
When we look at the Penfield Pavilion now, what color is it? It looks to me like it's white. Is it gray?
Penfield Lighthouse.
Lighthouse.
Penfield Lighthouse, excuse me, Penfield Lighthouse.
It's a...
It looks white.
Yeah, well, it looks white, yeah. I mean, the trim is all white. The paint on it, yeah, it is white, but when you take it off, it's going to be more of a gray color, because that's the color of the shingle.
Okay.
Right.
Now, in regards to, there's all sorts of regulations, and Eileen, I had asked, I guess through Mike and through Sandy, that at some point you review all those historical regulations that we've signed up for.
And I gave you a summary of what the regulations provide for in a general way, because, excuse me, as Ms. Mann pointed out, they're about this thick. And Mr. Girardi, I'm sure, would understand the technicalities of them better than I. I was reading them as a layperson and trying to give you a kind of a brief overview of what the regulations provide for.
Well, going from white to gray, is that going to have any effect whatsoever?
I don't...
If it's white now, it should stay white.
Okay, so we're going to change it to possibly gray in the first year by taking off the paint.
It's possibly that behind it is gray.
Okay,
Yeah.
and the shingles are not going to be, the paint's not going to go back on, or new shingles are not going to be put on until approximately year 4?
Well, correct, because there is no damage on the shingles at this time.
Okay, but my
And the
question...
envelope is pretty tight.
I guess my question is, from year 1 to year 4, whenever we go, it's going to go from white to gray, and is that a violation of the agreements that we're signing up for?
I guess that we'll have to look at.
Well, you know, what I could say is that, you know, because in year 4, it's slated to have, you know, shingles painted.
Yeah, I think it may help to come up to the mic and identify yourself. Sorry about that. Just so people in TV land can hear you.
Yes. I'm Jim Girardi, I'm with the engineering department here in Fairfield. Answering your question is, you know, we have it built into a year 4, and, you know, all this work really, from year 4 could be, you know, moved up to year 1. And it's a give and take thing, as long as we kind of stay within our bottom line number. The beauty about it is, yeah, if we have to, if we remove the lead paint and we could repaint it right away,
Then we'll do it.
then we'll do it. And then we'll just have to kind of borrow some money maybe from a different line item just to get it to work for that time period.
We'd have to get the money from what line account? A town line account?
Well, no, from one of these items listed in this 5-year program.
Things can move up.
Yeah, things can move up, and, I mean, this is just the basis of how the money is being allocated to be spent, and sometimes in year 5, it may end up moving up to year 2, for one reason or another.
Well, it seems that one of the reasons that we're going to have to all keep track of is what the requirements of everything we signed on for are, because everything that I've read in that contract that we're going under says that if we don't follow one of those things, they can take it back. We are in breach, and they can take back the lighthouse no matter how much money we paid for it.
But you'll find that those standards don't tell you that you have to repaint it within an X period of time.
Okay.
It just tells you that you have to preserve as much of the building as you possibly can, and then to the extent that you need to remediate, you remediate, doing as little as you can to the original structure. Is that a basic?
Yeah, and I think, what Eileen's saying is, I mean, we don't have a set of drawings, that has been produced yet. And usually, these things would be documented on that set of drawings. So if somebody from the Historic Preservation Committee came to us and said, you took the paint off and it was white paint and it's gray now. Well, if we have it documented on our drawings that it will be painted with white paint, I think the onus is kind of taken off us because we have actually planned for it. Now, and I think Eileen, I don't think there's a time frame involved, but again, we may have to look at that.
Those
Yeah.
standards that said that there was X period of time to do everything, just that it needed to be
Okay.
done.
May I read something to you from the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation and Illustrated Guidelines for Rehabilitating Historic Buildings? Cleaning surfaces with the gentlest method possible is to be used. So they don't want us working hard to take off and destroy what's there. And the only reason that these become important is that when the owner takes possession of the lighthouse, that they then go to the State Historic Commission, keeping these requirements in mind, which are, and from speaking with Mary Donahue, who administers this whole program, they do not want to see any inordinate means taken on anything that will destroy any of the historic value of a building. If something needs repair, they do want to be sure that it gets repaired in an appropriate way. But they, don't forget, they are not out to make this an impossible condition for us. That is their goal. And the fact that they are willing to underwrite historic renovations through grants that are matching grants up to $400,000 means that they are trying to help communities preserve the historic buildings that exist. So when you start to try and read into what we have on this piece of paper, what we've tried to do is to indicate to you the areas that we know need review. How much we have to do will be determined by the State Historic Commission when they review our plans. But keep in mind, they may tell us, do nothing with this, do nothing with that. There's a part in here under the masonry. For instance, instead of having to repoint everything, they say, let us know if you want to put a preservative treatment on stone and masonry instead of repointing them. When you start to go through all of this, and it's here in writing.
Usually, if any job that we've done, even in town, I've done a lot of, in my career, quite a bit of abatement work. I've always asked the Historic Commission or the Historical Society, before I've done anything, we've never worked for it, we always get permission to see if this is the direction they'd like us to go in, and I think that's the direction we would go in before we did anything.
And what's the methodology for removing this lead paint off of the exterior shingle?
Well, you could either chemical peel, since you're near, you know, it's going to be an environmental issue, because you're near Long Island Sound, and you see what they do near bridges, you know, when they start to peel paint off a bridge, you know. There's a couple of different ways of doing it, and that would be up to the hygienist. He would write the report and the proper way, the procedures to do it. That's why we hire him. He would take over as the project manager for all abatement, whether it be lead or asbestos.
So when you gave your estimates, you're basing that on the highest number possible, whatever the most expensive methodology is?
Well,
Because,
okay.
I presume that we are near the water.
Right.
The question is whether you can use chemicals that might go right into the water off the rocks.
Right.
And I take it that that methodology for removal would be more expensive. So
Well,
I'm
there's-
hoping
right.
that your numbers are based on the higher number and not the cheapest number.
Right. That's why we said some of this might have to move up. When we're looking at the first report, what we said, as far as we looked at plaster and lead, that's a demo, all right? The people are certified. You know, they're respirator certified, they're lead certified, asbestos certified. You're doing a demo job. They're just gutting it. That's all they're doing. The problem is you got to get it on a barge. You have to get it out of there. So yeah, this is the hygienist's job to make sure that the project goes safely and that we follow all protocol. As far as cost estimates, this is the best estimate we can get at this time. I mean, it's a big building. It's needs to be gutted.
Right, and excuse me, like Ed said, these are all just best guess estimates, you know, basing on just observations, you know, until there's a set of plans drawn up and actual work indicated. You know, people can't put definitive values unless you have a document to work from. So, I mean,
Yeah.
this is where usually you start before you have a set of plans, saying, okay, you know, we've kind of kicked around these numbers, and we have revised them. The bottom line number we revised with Rich a month ago, and then once we had a bottom line number, we broke out everything into the yearly numbers.
I guess at the very beginning of all this, we were told basically that it would be fundraising, trying to help this project along. So if we had to move it up, hopefully that the fundraising, we're trying to make it as safe as we could and show the government that we are making an effort to preserve the lighthouse. And by checking it out inside first, a lot of people say, well, the envelope. Well, we can't see much from the envelope. We really need to see from inside to see what's going on with the building. I think it would
Yeah,
be-
and I think so. And once you know, you get everything gutted on the inside, if it's not going to be used for public access, there's no need to really refinish the inside.
Later date.
Or, yeah, I don't know if we did it within here or not.
No, we
but-
didn't. No.
No.
That was confirmed by Mary Donahue with the Connecticut State Historical Society. If we are not going to have the public anywhere on the premises.
Ms. Mann, can you step up to the
Oh, I'm
mic when you
sorry.
speak, please?
I'm sorry. If the public is not going to have access to the building, the exterior can be preserved in the best form that it can be reached, and then it can be sealed. And that's it. So there is the potential for not doing a lot of work. Structurally, the interior, the beams look very good, and once we do that abatement, we don't have to do anything on the interior.
You might want to jump in just to clarify.
Yeah.
With the numbers here, did you assume you're going to seal it, or did you assume something else? What was the assumption that went into developing these?
We didn't make an assumption, sir.
Okay.
We tried to look, well, I shouldn't say we didn't make an assumption. We tried to look at the whole project. That represents the whole project, should and if everything were done.
Okay, you just talked about being able to seal it because nobody had to go inside. But is that included in these numbers?
No, those numbers would not reflect that. You could cut those numbers probably in half.
I'm confused with sealing.
Sealing
Public-
the
nobody can get
exterior.
in?
Yeah, for nobody to get in. Yeah, I mean, I
We-
think that's, would be part of the game plan from day one, that at this point, you know, I don't think you would have it open to the public. It's not handicapped accessible, right? I mean, it'll never be handicapped accessible. I think that would be something to really,
And
Yeah, I'm just trying-
these numbers don't reflect any kind of finishing on the inside or putting any kind of amenities on the inside. I mean, we're stripping it.
Okay, that's where I'm kind of getting
Yeah.
lost. We seem to be saying, we seal it, we don't do anything on the inside,
Anything on the inside.
and then we seem to be saying these numbers include not doing anything on the inside. So they assume we're going to seal the outside, and so this is the, if you will, the low-cost solution for doing that, because we're not going back inside and fixing it up.
At this time, correct. Right, correct.
Yeah,
We're trying to make
after
sure
the
structure's safe.
remediation's done,
Yeah.
we're going to clear it out and then pretty much lock it up
And that's
and
what the-
concentrate on the exterior.
And it takes $388,000 over this time period to basically seal it on the outside, lock it up, and
You know, the interior is probably going to be the most, if you look at the first year.
Well, that
It's the
did,
abatement.
did include the repair of the stairway.
Well, no, it does.
So
Yeah, there's stairwells.
There are
There's
some
the
interior
timbers,
things.
you know,
yeah.
there's things in there for the timbers that need to be replaced, things like that, to make the building safe, to make
Yeah.
it,
I'm still not hearing clearly that this, basically is the lowest cost solution, because it doesn't include the fixing up on the inside, the renovation on the inside.
right, correct.
This assumes we're going to seal it, nobody's going to go inside, and that's it.
Correct, sir. Yes.
So if we were to do anything else, it would cost more than this.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, just
Okay. No, that's
That's
fine.
okay.
A couple of things. In regard to, once the lead paint is taken off the exterior asbestos shingles, if those shingles stay exposed, they don't take damage from water or anything?
Expensive, no. No. You know, we really haven't researched that much on the shingles as we're talking here. You know, we're familiar with the asbestos shingles. They're hardy. They're just a product, and I imagine somebody painted them over the years, but it could have been, who knows what happened with it, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, generally, they come in a gray. They come in a gray.
Actually, no.
Yeah.
I had them.
Did you have one?
I had them on my house in Fairfield.
Did you?
They
White,
were,
yeah.
they were beige.
Yeah? Oh, okay.
But they
yeah.
do stand up to
Yeah.
water without paint. They stand up very well.
And it's aesthetics. I think they just did it for aesthetics.
And I know you did a 1 through 5 year comparison. If we did that work in those 1 through 5 years, what's going to be the maintenance on this thing on a yearly basis thereafter?
Well, that's what we put, actually,
Well, I think for your case, it would be
Yeah.
insurance, right?
yeah, there was insurance policy on
I'm
it.
talking about
Insurance.
maintenance on the building. What kind of maintenance on this building are we going to have to do year in and year out? for a building
Evaluations.
that's located in the middle of the sound.
Evaluations.
You have to
We
do
don't
it.
know, evaluations.
Yearly
I mean,
visit.
we're, you know, not everybody has a lighthouse. You know, we're learning. It would be evaluated every year.
I would say so. It'd be just like your own house. You notice something going wrong, okay, either you take care of it now, or you put it on your list and do it,
Yeah.
Okay,
you know.
but on my own house, I understand that I'm gonna have to paint my own house every certain number of years. I understand I'm gonna have to put my own roof on. There's a useful life for a roof. What is once it's painted, what's gonna be, how long with sea air around, are we gonna have to repaint this building once it's, to keep it sealed? Not doing anything on the interior, just to keep it sealed and waterproofed and, repointing if that's required, or as Sandy said, maybe sealing the stuff. I mean, has anybody thought about that, or?
We figure for paint,
Yeah,
2 to
I
3
mean-
years for painting?
It could be 2 to 3 years.
2 years on a sealer?
Right. And again, if anything is done on the shingles, or if anything is done on the trim, it's not going to be taken off. It's going to be done according to the rules of abatement. It just might be sanded down, but they're vacuumed in. It's up to the hygienist how this will go. The whole thing is not going to be stripped. You know, I mean, it's going to be removed the best it could. You know, we're not going to go in there and strip everything off. No, that I don't think we plan on doing
For what?
for the shingles or the wood or the trim. You know, we're not planning on stripping all the wood.
Oh, no. Well, you have to see what the
Yeah,
hygienist
right.
says.
Yeah, it's going to be up to the hygienist to see what has to be done. That's why we put a big thing on hygienist first.
All right, but generally, at least on the projects we've seen around town, if you have to remove lead paint, I mean, we're talking about stripping it down, all the way down, not leaving any, stuff on there. It's not
Well,
like, you do half the building and you don't do the other half.
Right,
It's
no,
either
we-
you remove it or you don't remove
It's
it.
like Burr. Burr,
Yeah.
we did a chemical peel. We did the entire front. The sides aren't done, and the back's not done. Someday, yes, we will get to it, but the cost of doing that is a lot of money. So what we did was we made it look decent, and we did a chemical peel in the front. I don't think you could tell that the front or the sides are any different at this time.
And again, this is just based on the assumption that it is lead paint.
Yeah, right.
You don't even know if it is lead
No.
paint. It could be,
Right. And we're just assuming because of the year, you know.
Are there any utilities out there? Because one of the first
Mr.
things.
Walsh, if I could ask you to
Sure.
take a break for just a minute, let Ms.
Oh,
McCarthy
I'm
Bay
sorry,
have-
sure.
I'm okay, I'll hear, I'd like to hear that one, and then I'll.
She's deferring back to you, Mr.
Okay, any utility costs out there at all? Because the agreement seemed to say that once we take possession, utility costs become ours day one. So I can't think of any, but I'm asking you guys, since you've been out there, whether there's any thought of any utility costs.
No.
Coast Guard, it's up to the Coast Guard. If the Coast Guard turn around and say that you're responsible for the,
Well, there are no
Yeah, we
utilities
did, yeah.
except there's a solar panel which operates the, well, which charges batteries, which operate the light and the horn.
Right.
That's
But-
all the utilities that are out there?
But yes, but those are also under the jurisdiction of the Coast Guard.
Yes, that's,
Those have nothing to do with the ownership of the building. And anyone there, I'm sorry, I'm away from the microphone, anyone there would not be able to use those. Those are specifically for the Coast Guard.
right. I don't think there's running water. There's no pump.
There isn't.
But I think there is, somebody said there's a sewer line that runs from there to the sewer plant.
I
Do
don't
you?
know, no, there was
Oh.
actually, there's a septic
Oh,
system.
okay, that's
There's
what it is.
environmental issues that we don't know until we get in there. You know, there's a septic system there that have to be reviewed. By now, it's probably rotted out and closed up. I don't see that being a real issue, but I mean, I'm not an expert on that. Somebody would have to figure that one out. We don't think there was ever an oil tank out there. We don't know that. That's something we have to review too. And that changes things if somebody by some weird chance put an oil tank in the ground.
I defer back to
Thank
Ms.
you,
McCarthy.
The floor is yours.
thank you.
I'm just giving you bad scenarios that things could happen, yes. yeah.
Well, I think that's, part of my concern is that we've had a number of those, and estimates, as you said, I think, Mr. Girardi, these are all just best guess estimates essentially, and until you get out there, until you can see, until you can really tear things apart and examine it, there's no real way to know exactly how much all of the necessary work is
Correct.
going to cost.
Correct.
So I guess just stepping back for a moment, this is my first regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen, so now that I'm sitting here, I've been following this conversation, and when using the word "we," it feels a little bit like in this conversation, there's this, you two work for the town. We're talking about the town doing work, but my understanding has been that the goal, and I heard this mentioned during the conversation, would be that these funds needed, the "we" who would pay for those would be a nonprofit organization that would fundraise and come up with the 388,000 best guess estimate or whatever was needed to do the actual work. Am I incorrect in my assumption of that, or do you have a different set of assumptions that you all have been
We were
operating
just
with?
asked to do the plans.
Yeah,
And
we were
where the
just
money's
asked to
coming
help.
from is, we're saying that, of course, like any other historic building in town, we do work on all the historic buildings. So I would imagine that the town at some point would go out there and inspect it. I mean, we have the expertise. I mean, unless they're gonna hire somebody every year to go out, but that's up to, to the town.
Ms. Mann, could you address Ms. McCarthy Bay's question?
We had planned to be fundraising and for the nonprofit committee to work with the town on this. But, if the town were to provide some assistance with the remediation, that would be great. We've tried to look at the cost of actually doing what needs to be done on here.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's up in the air still. This
Up
is
in the air.
it's an evolving process. In other words.
That is
this-
for sure.
right, It hasn't been defined,
But
and we, in terms of the town, haven't committed to anything, and you're saying you're still working with folks to figure out what the costs are and what will be able to be covered by any fundraising.
Well, we feel that this is an accurate estimate of the costs. We've put a lot of time into this. And both Mr. McCord and Mr. Girardi have been very generous with their time on this. These numbers are based on their knowledge.
Minimal. Just what we can say, minimal.
Okay.
And,
If I jump in?
Yes, oh, yeah.
Okay, I guess just getting back, when this was originally proposed, it was going to be a nonprofit corporation that would raise money, purchase the lighthouse, possibly maintain it through the historic Fairfield Museum as part of their properties. So there wasn't any implication at the time of any cost to the town. And I guess, as much as I see the cost breakout here, is there a financial plan that goes along with this that shows how the money's going to be raised, what's going to be, to hit these numbers? Because these look like some really big numbers to hit. And again, back to Ms. McCarthy-Beatty's question, are you assuming any contribution from the town in these numbers, or do you have a financial plan to raise this money without any support from the
We
town?
have not included any funding from the town in these numbers. We have yet to put the financial plan together. We have focused on getting this 5-year plan done for you and focused on the aspect of the insurance potential as far as getting accurate cost figures on that. And we know that we have to put a 5-year plan together. Part of that has been dependent upon perhaps working through a partnership. I have been in touch with Mr. Henneberry at your request. I've talked with him several times. He feels that it is entirely possible that second bidder may pull out of the auction. I don't know why he feels that way, but his reaction was to sit back and wait to see what happens. As you know, we have now been notified by the General Service Administration that there is going to be what's called a soft close on the bidding on December 12th, which means that if no bids come in within 24 hours of that date, the auction will be closed. Whether or not the person with the highest bid will accept the lighthouse at the current price of $40,000 remains to be seen. Sometimes people forfeit their deposit. I would hate to think that someone whom we don't know, perhaps from outside of this area, would get away with possession of that lighthouse for $40,000. That's where I stand on this at this point. But but the committee also feels that we should make every attempt to try to move forward.
Yeah, my concern is, and one of the concerns that doesn't seem to be addressed with what we have before us is, the committee was formed in July.
Yes.
It's now December. Let's say that's 5 months. We've raised $20,000.
Mm-hmm.
We're saying in the first year we need to raise an additional $150,000.
Mm-hmm. I understand what you're saying.
I guess I'm looking at how this...
How are we going to do it? I understand that that's a concern. We felt that if we were able to put together the purchase price, that we would then put a huge effort into a great deal of fundraising. I know that I've mentioned to you that Norwalk uses the Oyster Festival to support all of their maritime activities related to the lighthouse. I feel that it is possible, perhaps not with the particular makeup of the committee that we have at this point in time, but I feel that there are people that would support the committee and would volunteer to assist and develop a strong fundraising program.
But you haven't identified those people or asked them to join the committee as of yet?
At this point, we have been limited by the selection from the appointment of the committee. One gentleman, Bill Sapone, recently resigned from the committee because he felt that he has had too much on his plate. There are a couple of individuals who wanted to be involved who have not shown up for any meetings. We have not asked you about replacing them because, to be candid with you, we do not quite know yet what the place of the committee might be. For instance, if the town does not make a step forward in acquiring the lighthouse, and someone else ends up acquiring the lighthouse instead.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Oh, thank you, I'm sorry. It may be in the town's best interest to have that committee reformed with the understanding of monitoring what is actually going on in terms of what a new owner might do. There is the potential for that. So rather than taking too many steps forward in a direction that we don't know whether we'll be allowed to sustain or not, the committee has chosen to go into a holding pattern at this point.
Okay. And up until this point, the deposit is fully refundable?
Yes, it
and
certainly
that
is.
doesn't change unless what happens?
Unless we make a bid, and our bid is a winning bid.
If our bid's a losing bid, does all the money come back?
Yes, every bit of it. And if you recall, the committee determined at the very beginning that since we were asking people to make donations in good faith, stating that our goal was to acquire the lighthouse, that if we did not acquire the lighthouse, we would return all donations to the donors.
Did you have some along those lines?
Yes, to follow up, so since the last Board of Selectmen meeting, have there been additional donations that have been raised?
A few have come in. They've been of a smaller nature, though. Unfortunately, the economy has hit everyone. We've had one large one of $1,000. We know the interest is out there. I think that the uncertainty of the situation and the uncertainty of the economic conditions now has made a huge difference in the way people are approaching this.
If I can, and if you had to list the top 3 benefits to the town of acquiring the lighthouse, what would they be?
Oh, my. The top 3 benefits would be, the first one, obviously, is preserving a historic building that we all look at as being a part of Fairfield.
Does that only happen if the town buys it or acquires it?
No,
Doesn't that pretty much happen no matter who
that
buys it?
happens no
acquires it?
matter who buys it.
What are the top 3 benefits that accrue to the town if the town acquires the lighthouse?
I can't answer that question for the simple reason that I know that there's a great deal of work that needs to be done on the structure. And I'm trying not to let my emotional feelings get in the way of a reasonable, rational answer to that question. It does help us preserve the historic character of this town, although
Doesn't
you may
that
not-
happen regardless of who-
Regardless?
who acquires it?
Maybe yes and maybe no.
Okay, help us out, because the guidelines you provided seem pretty solid in terms of what had to be done, that everything has to be approved by the state historic preservation officer, who works for the building owner, and seems to have the final say on these issues, according to Attorney Kennelly's summary here. In fact, if they don't like what's going on, they even have the authority without notice to the owner to convey the property to a third party,
That is correct.
presumably if he or she does not believe the owner is following the correct preservation and rehabilitation methods. So that seems to be a pretty good lock, that whoever does something has to do it with their approval, has to follow their guidelines, or they lose all the dollars they put into the lighthouse up to that point, which would be a pretty strong financial incentive to follow the preservation officer's guidelines. So again, what I'm missing is, it seems that whatever happens from this, the benefit to the town is we get to sail by a lighthouse that looks like it has, and I'm not sure what the benefit of us taking the liability of and going out to our citizens and raising $500,000 or $400,000 over the next few years versus letting somebody else do that, and we still get the same benefit.
I can understand that that perspective is shared by a lot of people. It's difficult for me to comment on this because, to me, that lighthouse is part of Fairfield. It's like saying that something that's in our backyard is not worth getting engaged with, not being involved with. That has been my perspective all along. If I had to try to pick out 3 things, I would be hard-pressed. I admit that. But every child that lives in Fairfield that goes to those beaches looks out there, and that's our lighthouse to them.
But much like many of the historic homes in Fairfield, they're owned by private property owners.
Mm-hmm.
Much
Yes.
like something like the Pequot Library is owned by a nonprofit, but a non-town organization.
Mm-hmm.
And that's,
Well, to be honest with you, we had talked about that at the beginning of the committee being together again. We feel that we unfortunately lost a great deal of time during that time period when Beacon Preservation was out there and had that property sort of in a state of limbo. If we had had any idea that any of this was going to come to be in the way it is, with the lighthouse going up for auction, we would have been out there that entire time raising money. We did not expect that the town's financial position would change so significantly in 1 month's period of time either, when we entered into this committee and started our work and our deliberations. So the circumstances surrounding all of this have changed significantly in a very short period of time.
okay, that's, again, I'll go back to when we
Well,
discussed
I
this in
can't-
July. It wasn't even going to be owned by the town. There was going to be a separate nonprofit organization set up at that point.
We thought that the people in town would support our fundraising efforts in a much more committed way than they have.
And that's, and again, I don't mean to, my observation in having attended your fundraisers, your committee worked really hard, put in a lot of hours.
Oh, yes.
Did everything they could to raise money on this behalf. As you pointed out, this is a very tough economy.
Oh, yes.
That somehow brings us back to the fact that if it's difficult to raise more than $20,000 in 6 months, it may be considerably harder to raise another $150,000 in potentially less time than that if you're going to get the work done out in the lighthouse within the next
Certainly.
year.
We understand that. There are a few people on the committee who have chosen to withhold their agreement with going forward with this. I understand that the position that they're in and why they feel that way.
Was there a vote of the committee on going forward?
Yes, there was.
What was that vote?
7 in favor, 2 opposed, 1 abstention.
Okay. I've got some other questions, but I don't mean to.
Go ahead. I'm good. Right now.
There are actually 2 parts of this resolution. One concerns getting the bottomlands.
Yes.
I believe I had a conversation with Attorney Kennelly earlier today, and they highlight some of the thinking between the federal government and the state on who they would let those bottomlands go to. Can you highlight us on that?
In the invitation for bids, it specifically states that the winning bidder would go to the state and get a lease for the bottomlands from the state. And there is legislation that would tend to make you believe that that's what would happen. If you read the legislation carefully, it doesn't specifically say that the owner of the lighthouse has to be the lessee. So I've spoken to the state about whether they would consider leasing it to another entity, namely the town. And they've agreed with me that the legislation does not specifically say it has to be the lessee of the lighthouse. But as Ms. Mann mentioned, they would like to have a statement from an authoritative body as to why we believe that we have interests that need to be protected that are different from and perhaps narrower than the state's interest as a lessor. So they would be looking for some kind of an explanation from the town as to why it thought that it should be the lessor and then sublease the light to the person who wins the auction.
Okay. I thought I understood you say that they kind of indicated they were looking to lease it to the person that acquired.
That had
lighthouse.
been their assumption all along, up until the time when I brought up to them that if you read the statute carefully, you could come to the conclusion that it was not necessary to lease it to the person who won the auction.
Okay,
But up until last week, yes, they expected to lease it to the person who won the auction.
Okay, and they've changed their position.
They've said they would consider leasing it to us if we could give them some very good reasons why.
Did they give any example of what those reasons might be?
No, they did not. Their suggestion was that if we had some particular things we would like to see in the lease, they would take those under consideration to include in their lease with the winner of the auction.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I think Krista has a question.
Go ahead.
I think to follow up, I think you're going to confirm what you just said, but similar to Mr. Tetro's question to Ms. Mann a few minutes ago, what would be the benefits of us holding the lease for that? In other words, is there a benefit to the town in holding the lease for this and then subleasing potentially to a private owner?
The main one I've been able to think of is that because we are here near to the lighthouse, we might have a little better ability to see what's going on, to make sure that the tenant actually was doing what they were supposed to do. Now, having said that, yes, the State Historic Preservation Officer has an obligation to keep an eye on that as well. But we are right nearby. We can see whether the lighthouse has turned pink or something like that and immediately make sure that something is done about it. Whereas the state is 90 miles away and doesn't have that same capacity to just look out their window and see what's going on.
May I follow up? Does holding the lease give us that authority if they still own the building, someone else still owns the building?
Yes, we would have some ability to control what the lessee did with the property, as the state intends to do. The state intends to put in the lease, for example, that it cannot be used as a residence or as a bed and breakfast. So there are things that can be put in the lease that would control what the owner can do with it.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, the state's willing to put language in that we also support, but the primary benefit to us is really proximity and not having to have another layer of communication, so to speak, so that if we as a town did not have the lease and the state did, we would be able to speak more directly to the issue rather than having to go through another channel.
That's correct.
There is, if I may add, there is another aspect to this that was mentioned to me when I spoke with Mr. Black yesterday. If we were to go forward and try to obtain a lease at this point with the intention of taking ownership later on, it would also allow us to have a tax district for that property. Don't forget that building has been, that structure has been under the control of the federal government. If we go by the aquaculture charts, we're talking about jurisdictional issues there as well. And we would be allowed and able then to be sure that there were building permits, for instance, that the health department had the right to go in and perhaps inspect and make sure that no living accommodations were being put there. And it would give us a different level, or the ability to have a different level of involvement with whomever the purchaser might be.
Go ahead.
Yes, I think that's true, although I do understand the state would be willing to put some of those provisions into their own lease if we asked for that.
Go ahead.
Just on the other side of that, what are the liabilities if we hold the lease as opposed to the state?
The only liability I can see is that if, in the unlikely case, given the fact there's no public access, that someone somehow were injured out there on that lighthouse, at the lighthouse, that just on the general principle that you sue everybody in sight, we might get sued too, although I find it hard to see how we could possibly have any liability, since what we own is underneath everything. But that doesn't mean that we would be found liable. It just means might have the nuisance of a lawsuit.
Thank you.
And of course, we would have insurance if we were, well, we would probably have to get insurance even as the landlord, when I think about it. I would think we would want to be sure that we were covered.
Okay. Any other questions? Jim?
Yes, through you to Ms. Kennelly. We had at one point owned the bottomlands, right?
That is correct. They were a quitclaim to us by the state.
When did they get quitclaim to us?
I don't remember precisely, because I don't remember precisely when we were last involved in, maybe Ms. Mann would remember. When was it we were last involved with taking over the lighthouse?
I think it was around
2006?
2006
Yeah.
or 2007.
So it was in the neighborhood of, it was sometime, I believe, in 2006 that we had the property quitclaim to us.
Okay, and then at some point, how long did we own them before, I understand we quitclaimed them back to the state?
Correct.
2008.
I don't know, I didn't think it was that late, but the whole period in which we had them was, my recollection was perhaps a year. So maybe it was 2007 when we acquired it, if it was 2008 when we sent it back.
When we sent them back, did that go through the RTM or any other body? Did it come through the Board of Selectmen? Did it go to any other town body?
It did not, but then neither did the grant to us in the first place.
And I guess the question I have is, I thought under the charter, if we were going to get stuff like that, we had to, that had to go through.
If we were going to get it, we should have, we actually should have been brought to the bodies before before the state ever gave it to us.
Yes.
At the point when we had requested the state legislature to enact a statute, or to enact a special act that would give us the lighthouse, or the quitclaim us the lands under the lighthouse, that really should have gone before all the bodies at that point, indicating that we were willing to accept the land. And that never happened.
Do you know why it did never happen?
I have no idea.
So we didn't follow the charter in accepting the land. What about when we transferred it back? Did that have to go through all the town bodies pursuant to the charter?
Arguably. We were parting with something that had essentially been imposed on us improperly, so it seemed that to return to the status quo before the property was imposed on us would not be a violation of the charter, in that the charter assumed we would be parting with property that we had properly acquired in the first place.
Okay. But at a minimum, we should have gone through the Board of Selectmen, parting of that property.
To tell you the truth, at this point, I couldn't answer that question.
All right. Why were we able to get it in 2006, 2007, and we don't know
Because-
whether we can get it back? Because to me, it seems like we have a lot more control on a quitclaim deed where we are now the property owner.
Well, we have to go to the
versus-
legislature for that, though, as we did in the first place, get it through the legislature.
there-
So the idea of getting a lease at this point would simply be to get the short-term control and then have the time to go to the legislature and ask to get the property quitclaim to us. All of which assumes, by the way, that again, the RTM agrees that we want to acquire the land before we would do that.
Is there anything that you know of, or Mike, that you've heard of through the First Selectman's office that seems to have changed why they would not, no longer give us a quitclaim deed? I understand our state delegation at the time was involved in that.
Representative Drew was the main
Okay.
party
Yeah,
behind
is there anything
that.
that's changed, whether Connecticut general statutes,
Well,
policy-wise,
the
that
original,
has changed?
the statute under which they can now do a lease
Mhm.
is specific to Penfield Lighthouse and was subsequent to that special act. And being a more general, an act of general application, it's not it was not a special act, as I recall. It was viewed as superseding the original act that had given the town the land in 2006 or 7.
Mhm.
So yes, there has been a statutory change that would require us to go back and ask for it to be changed back to where it could come to us.
So there's nothing that anybody seems to know of that would prevent us from going back and we'd be in a worse
I'm
situation? than
not
last
aware of anything that would prevent us from doing that.
Okay. In regard to letting people live there,
Correct.
there's been various statements that have been made along the way, some saying that there's absolutely no right, this man, you had said that at one point, that there's no possible way that anybody could ever live there. Then Ms. Stenick said she had thought that there was a possible way that you could put in for some type of waiver or or something that would allow you to live there, from what you've reviewed, can somebody potentially live there?
There's
bidder.
nothing in the law that says that someone couldn't live there. The state the state's policy is that no one can live there because you can't reactivate the septic system out there. There are a variety of health laws that would get in the way with someone actually being able to establish a residence there again.
But you can be pumped out, kind of like on a boat.
From what I understood, they would not allow for a septic system to be reestablished on the reef. On the lighthouse structure.
Well, I guess I'm not talking about a septic system where it kind of regenerates into the ground. What I'm
Right.
talking about is a system that would collect, kind of like on an RV, and where you get pumped out, kind of like boats have pump-out boats that come and pump them out. And whether someone could take advantage of that and therefore have a residence without needing a septic system.
I didn't inquire into it in great detail. That was one example that was given to me as to why the state would not permit someone to live there. I understood there could be others as well, although I see Ms. Stenick has a contribution to make here.
Depending on who you talk to, you get different answers, but when we spoke to the DEP, because that was something we thought, if you can pump out a boat, why can't somebody live there and have a holding tank that could be pumped? But the person that we spoke to, Mr. Blatt, at the DEP, said absolutely they did not want anybody staying there overnight. They could come and fish during the day, do something, whatever they want during the day, but they wanted them to leave, and they said it was for safety, and he said it wasn't because of like the environmental concern. Whereas the health department was more on the environmental concern, but the man in the health department at the state had told me that in Norwalk, there's an island that had septic or something, and when they went bad, they allowed them to do the holding tanks because the housing was existing. But that's a little different than this, where the housing hasn't been used in some time, and he wasn't quite sure how that would be approached from their perspective. But Mr. Blatt was adamant that they did not want to see anybody sleeping there, the DEP.
So it was their intention to put it in their lease that no one would be able to reside or stay in the lighthouse.
And you are aware that, at least Ms. Mann's represented, that several of the bidders plan on living there, at least even part-time.
I had heard that,
And
yes.
people who even have money down on this thing.
I had heard that, yes.
May I add something? In a conversation with Mr. Blatt again, 2 days ago, he reiterated to me that the DEP feels that there are safety issues, and under no circumstances would they allow anyone to inhabit the lighthouse.
I take it not owning the property and leasing it might have some benefit if there turned out to be an environmental problem.
Perhaps. I'm afraid I'm not an expert in that aspect of environmental law as to whether there is
It might be something we
to be looked
consider
into,
and
sure.
Analyze prior to making the determination of whether we want to own it
Fair
or
enough,
lease it.
sure.
And to the gentlemen who are here, I guess in yes or no, do you know how that building, people used to live there?
Yes, and I
Could
think
I
that,
ask you to step up to the
Sure.
podium and enlighten us all?
I think people did live there as a lighthouse keeper when lighthouses were true lighthouses. Today, this lighthouse is automated, where it has a solar panel that charges batteries, and this may be why they don't want anybody in this house, because there are large banks of batteries that could pose health hazards to anybody living there. But anyways, those batteries are used for powering the horn and the light. And
Mr. McCourt made reference to some environmental issues that may be there that you've not analyzed, such as an oil tank that may be in the ground. The question is when someone lived there, how did they get heat? When they lived there through the winter, how did one get heat while they
okay.
lived in that building?
without really finding out too much that we didn't see, okay? They did have a fireplace there. It is closed up now and it's capped on top. And I'm assuming that's how they were provided heat, because I don't think there was any electricity out there at all. And without electricity, you burn
Unless
wood.
there was an in-ground oil tank.
Unless, perhaps, yes. But
All right. Well, I would just suggest that we have a further conversation in regards to environmental potential issues before we make a determination if in the future we decide to go the lease versus purchase idea.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Kristen? All right. Any comments from the public? All right. We have two resolutions before us. Any more comment from the board before we vote?
Thank you.
Thank you.
This, yeah. It's
Go right
actually,
ahead.
it's one, right, it's really one resolution together.
Okay.
correct? And I think, my comment would be, I have concerns about the second part, voting to support the second part of this resolution, given what that could potentially commit the town to at this point. I'm more inclined to support the first part of this, to go forward to looking at a lease for the bottomlands, but have concerns about that part two.
All right. Do you have a motion or amendment or anything you'd like to suggest at this time?
Not yet. I mean, I would like to hear any other comments from this group, or I could if,
All right.
Well, I guess I hear Chris's point, by if we become the successful bidder, it becomes our building. And to me, it seems like we put the town on the hook as the owner to have to preserve it or risk, I guess, losing it again. I guess we can sit here and do nothing and let it fall, or or be in breach of maintenance on it. But to me, it seems as though once we own it, it's ours, and we become financially responsible, even if the committee's unable to raise any more money over those 5 years. So to me, it's a commitment that we have to look at and understand. The fact that they've only been able to raise $20,000, and I understand their fundraising has been somewhat limited. I mean, I was surprised to hear that they didn't go to any of the merchants or anything else like that, and maybe that's a possibility, but in this economy and where we are right now, the fact that we only raised $20,000 in 6 months, and yet we're committing the town at that point to make up whatever difference they cannot raise, is concerning. As much as I want to save this lighthouse for the town's purposes.
Yeah, I would agree, except I would say that we clearly said the town's not committed to doing that, so the issue becomes one, if we don't raise the money, does the lighthouse just go back into Never Never Land and be handed off to somebody else? If we don't do the preservation work, at some point, the preservation officer can come in and just take it and hand it off to anybody else. And given what we have here, my concerns are, one, there is no financial plan, and I believe the committee really worked hard in this economy to raise as much money as they could. Just in this economy, raising $400,000 on top of the potential acquisition price is not easy to do. And I don't see it getting any easier over the next 4 or 5 years. We've got a lighthouse that's a historic structure that whoever owns it can't change the color, can't change the look, and has to preserve it according to the guidelines here. And there is a state officer that looks over how they do that, what materials they use, how they maintain it, that type of thing. And additionally, I don't see the benefits to the town, and we weren't able to enumerate those here, or articulate those here, in terms of if we own it, what do we get? If we don't own it, what do we get? Because the restrictions are the same on whoever owns it. So at this point, I can't support going forward really with either resolution, or either part of the resolutions. To get the bottom lands, if the state's going to give it to whoever winds up bidding it, we can wait till then. It may be just the way I reacted to what Attorney Kennelly said in terms of understanding the obligations there, but it sounded like the state was leaning towards giving it to the folks that owned it, unless we could come up with some great reason why it should be us and not them. And I would think that the GSA, federal government, might argue against that because they want whoever gets the lighthouse to own the land. So I think the bottom lands, moving forward on that, I don't see the benefit at the moment, and I was one of the supporters of going to do that previously. And then submitting a town bid, I'm not clear on how we support that, given we've got $400,000 of potential liability here that we don't know how we're going to raise that. And Mr. Walsh, to your point, I just don't see the town having the money to come up and do that. So I don't want to place the cart before the horse. I think we should know where the money's coming from before we commit to supporting this type of venture. So at this point, I'm having trouble moving forward on this from my personal standpoint.
Getting to Kristen's point about doing the first resolution, though, what would be the harm in at least starting the process to try to get the bottom lands? At least whoever ends up bidding it would have to know that they were dealing with us as the landlord.
Assuming the state let us do that and
Yeah.
all that, I don't believe there's any harm, which is why I'd suggested that a few months back. Go ahead and get the bottom lands.
Yeah.
Get started on it. So
I'm wondering
as
whether
far
we-
as there's no cost,
Yes.
there's no harm in doing that.
Sure.
All that can happen is the state can decide not to give them to us if they choose, but
Yeah, so guess I'm wondering whether we should just amend the resolution to just have the first part and just modify it not to have the second part. And at least go through the exercise or begin the exercise and start working with our legislative delegation to hopefully work with them to support either getting support for a lease and showing and articulating the reasons why, since it's in our maybe it's not our backyard, but it's several hundred yards off our shore, why we'd be the best person to enforce our rights or to own it,
yeah.
to control it in perpetuity for the town. It just, I would like to go forward with that only because there seems to be questions still outstanding, which no one can seem to answer or get a definitive answer about whether anybody can live there.
Okay.
And, I keep hearing, it depends on who you ask. I keep hearing all these nice, things. The last person is, we don't want to do it for safety. But once you get lawyers involved and people purchase it and, deep pockets and someone starts going and finds a voice that they like and get permission, all of a sudden we have people out there living in a little pink house.
Do you have a motion to make at this time?
Yes, I would like to amend the motion to remove the further resolved portion and just have so that it would end at the word perpetuity.
Okay.
I'll
Is there a second?
it. I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussion on the amendment and the amendment only? Okay, if we go to the public? Any comments from the public on the amendment and the amendment only, please? Not hearing any, not seeing any? Would you like to talk, Mr. Spino? Please identify yourself with the mic.
Jerry Spino. The only thing I was considering here that hasn't actually been brought up, and I don't know if it's relative.
This is about the amendment and the amendment only,
In the lease, that if you follow through,
okay?
are there considerations in relation to the commercial aspect of the property or the building on the property in regard to photographic or other uses? If the town wanted to use the building as a logo or something, would there be an issue in that regard? Somebody else buys it, you have to pay them for the use of that image. If you own the bottom land, perhaps in the lease, that issue could be ameliorated or dealt with. That was the only consideration I had.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? All right, back to the board. Any further discussion? Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All right, all in favor
Of the amendment?
of the amendment, of amending?
Aye.
Aye, all right. So the new motion now reads, resolved that the town proceed to obtain a lease on the bottomlands from the state of Connecticut in lieu of obtaining a quitclaim deed, and to pursue the possibility of obtaining a quitclaim deed to secure the bottomlands in perpetuity. That's the motion before us. Any further discussion? Mr. Walsh? All right. Any public comment? Mr. Andre, if you'd go to the mic.
Just as a homeowner in town, if the town has the lease of the property, would the town have the right to inspect the premise? Let's say me as a private entity and decide to buy the lighthouse and have to pocket and manage to put a residence there.
I don't mean to sound like I have the final word, but I believe what we heard is that it would take a lot of exceptional wording
It's still possible.
to get the residents. If we own the bottomland, the federal government is in the process of finding a new owner for this. So in the next 30 days, they expect to have the lighthouse owned by somebody.
But let's assume it's a private entity. Then we can put that property to commercial use, for example.
No, it can never be.
It can never be.
It can never be put to commercial use. You must follow the regulations of the National Historic Register. That building is listed on the National Historic Register and cannot be used for commercial purposes.
So it doesn't matter the amount of money that I have, if I,
You may not use it, you must stay
I would,
you must stay within the covenants.
Mr. Andre, I would suggest that you seek counsel and advice from your own consultants to get a proper answer to that question.
thank you.
Thanks.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion from the public? Any further discussion here? We ready to vote?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. All in favor of the motion before us?
Aye.
Aye. All right. All right. Next item up is a resolution from the fiscal officer to hear, consider, and act upon a resolution authorizing the issuance of bonds in a principal amount of $250,000 to finance the remaining unpaid costs incurred in connection with the construction of the Harbor Road Bridge. Is Mr. White here for this?
Yes, he is.
Mr. Hiller is. Oh, there he is.
But Mr. White's in the back.
Mr. Hiller, did you have some other documentation with this? I didn't.
We do not have any other documentation of this, but Mr. White was not aware that this was put onto the agenda. That is the bond resolution prepared by bond counsel. And we would ask that this item be tabled to a date certain, of 2 weeks, the meeting scheduled for 2 weeks from today. To fully discuss the project.
Okay.
Full documentation will be available at that time.
All right, can I have a motion to that effect?
I will so move.
Second?
Second, please.
Any discussion? To a date certain, the next meeting on the 21st.
December 21.
Any further discussion on that? Any comments from the public on that? Back to the board. Are you ready to vote?
Yep.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Hiller.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
All right. Metro Center update, to hear a report from independent counsel. Let's see, in talking, Mr. Vitarelli and I spoke briefly before this. He recommended that we hear his opinion in private executive session initially, and then, so at this point, I would entertain a motion to move into private executive session.
I think we have to state why on the
Uh,
record, for which of the reasons. So if Betsy
In order
Yeah.
to maintain attorney-client privilege.
Okay, and this is, I take it, I just want to be clear, just for the
I
record.
don't believe it's one of the four that are listed there, but in discussions with Mr. Vitarelli as well as Attorney Kennelly, they both stated that that was a consideration.
Mr. Tetro, may I make
Yes.
make a suggestion? The first would be to amend the agenda, this is a regular meeting, to add to it an executive session for the purpose of discussing a document covered by the attorney-client privilege. And then you can move into executive session after that.
All right?
So does that mean we don't talk about this as a regular matter, and then we bring it up again under, where we bring up new business?
The other item, you can go back under the original agenda item later, if you so choose, or you can decline not to go through it at all, depending upon how the executive session goes.
I mean, to me, I think it makes sense to then not hear the Metro Center update that's listed here, to decide that we're not going to have it, but then to bring up what you just said as kind of new business for all three of us to vote to put it on the agenda.
You could do that as
Okay.
well.
I'm just trying not to break an FOI
Yeah, that-
violation.
And I think that's what Attorney Vitarelli is suggesting. I think that if we add that to the agenda now, we can cover that. We can,
Okay.
the Metro Center update, we can choose to continue to discuss or not, based
Okay.
on
Okay.
the developments in there.
All right.
So from, let's see, so we have two votes. One is to change the agenda to, and Mr. Vitarelli, if you could state that again, please?
Sure. I would amend the agenda to add an executive session item for the purpose of discussing a document covered by the attorney-client privilege.
Charlotte, do you have that all down?
Wait for that. Amend the agenda to add an executive session item for the purpose of discussing.
A document covered by the attorney-client privilege.
This takes a 2/3 vote.
Yes, it does.
Of course,
May I have a motion?
I make a motion. I make that motion.
Okay, a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I see that Assistant Town Attorney Eileen Kennelly is no longer in the room, but you mentioned that you had a conversation as our FOIA officer with her. I share.
I did as well.
And you did as well, okay. I share Mr. Walsh's concern. I do not want to be in breach of FOIA, and,
I think we're all agreed in that regard.
okay.
All right.
And just for the record, I'm relying on Attorney Vitarelli's legal opinion in regard to that on behalf of the town, that we can do this without violating Freedom of Information Act.
And again, I think we all are.
Okay.
All right. Ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So the agenda is now amended. May I have a motion to go into private executive session?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Green. There you go.
Our business? All right, may I have a motion that we come out of private executive session?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Just want to confirm that there were no votes taken in private executive session.
And we also invited Attorney Vitarelli in.
Yes, Attorney Vitarelli was our invited guest. Next up is the First Selectman Board of Selectmen meeting dates, calendar year 2012. Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Is the 18th of April usually held during the break? And this board, I know other boards move their meetings. Just curious.
We can take a look at it then and
Okay.
get something that fits. I'm happy
Just curious.
to
That's fine with me.
be flexible on that.
Which date?
We want to look at April
School.
18th and see if for a possible change of that down the road. But for the moment, there are no amendments to this calendar.
Nope.
With the school closings for the hurricane,
Yeah,
that
maybe.
vacation's looking in jeopardy.
All right, any further discussion on our calendar?
Nope.
Ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, it's done. All right, next up, Town Attorney, private executive session on litigation. Can I have a motion to go into private executive session?
So moved.
Second?
Second, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're rolling.
Okay, I move to,
Can I have a motion to end executive session?
So moved.
A second?
second.
All in favor?
Well, I would hold, oh, yeah, an exec, yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Just want to confirm there are no votes taken in executive session.
We also want to confirm that we're taking the town attorney's advice.
Okay, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, that we take the town attorney's advice as he spelled out in the first manner.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Charlotte, did you get that?
You taking the town attorney's advice? What was the rest of it?
In,
On the first manner.
all right. Next up is to hear, consider, and act upon any communications. Don't believe I have any at this point. Next up is to hear, consider, and act upon other business that which shall properly come before this board. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it at this hour. We do have the need to name a road, and that's the road that runs through, from Black Rock Turnpike through the train station, through the Metro Center. So I will get this sheet back out to you. I would ask for your thoughts on what process we should use to find that name. But with your permission, not tonight.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I think I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.